Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Coming up a little bit later in the show, we'll tour the Polaris plant in Roseau, Minnesota. But first, joining me now is North Dakota U.S. Attorney Tim Purdon. Tim, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
As we get started, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I was born in Oaks, North Dakota, and grew up right across the border in Ashby, Minnesota, a small town near Fergus Falls. Came back to the state in '87, graduated from the State College of Science in Wahpeton, attended Moorhead State here in Fargo-Moorhead, a law school down in St. Paul at Hamline University School of Law, and moved back to North Dakota in '94. I clerked for a federal judge out in Bismarck, met my wife, got a job, practiced law in Bismarck in private practice for 15, 16 years, and then I'm now North Dakota's U.S. Attorney.
Well, now tell us a little bit about how do you become a U.S. Attorney for North Dakota?
Well, I had decided early, around 2001, 2002, that I'd like to be U.S. Attorney someday, and so I began sort of the process of preparing myself to be a candidate for that office if the opportunity would ever come up, basically by some of the types of cases I took in private practice and just some of the relationships I built. And so when President Obama was elected, eventually in February of 2010, I was nominated to be U.S. Attorney, confirmed unanimously by the Senate in August of 2010. I've been on the job for just over 2 years now.
Okay. What does a U.S. Attorney do in North Dakota?
Well, the U.S. Attorney's Office in North Dakota, first and foremost, I'm the manager of our office. We have 17 lawyers, 18 lawyers now, some of the finest lawyers in North Dakota, and I get to lead them every day. That's a really exciting and humbling experience. But legally, what the United States Attorney does is represents the United States of America. I'm the chief federal law enforcement official in the state of North Dakota. We prosecute all federal crimes. The assistant U.S. attorneys in my office prosecute all the federal crimes that occur in North Dakota. We also represent the United States if the United States gets sued. Somebody slips and falls at the post office and they sue the United States of America. We have lawyers who represent and defend the United States in court. And so those are the primary duties. We act as the lawyer for the greatest client an attorney could ever have, the United States of America.
Okay, and I assume all states have similar situations?
There are 93 U.S. attorneys. Some states, like North Dakota, have one. Other larger states are split into judicial districts. For instance, California and Texas each have 4 U.S. attorneys.
Okay. Can you talk about how the job works in terms of being appointed by the president and really how did that just come about for you? I mean, you set it up, but really...
Yeah. Well, after the election, I submitted my resume to the White House and to the senators from North Dakota and went through a process of vetting, was eventually contacted by the Department of Justice, was vetted by them, had a background check done by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The Federal Bureau of Investigation conducted 70 face-to-face interviews. They interviewed my high school basketball coach, if you can imagine that, as part of the background check. And once that process was through and I'd come through that vetting process, like I said, I was nominated by the President in February of 2010 and eventually confirmed by the Senate.
Well, I mean, I don't know how anybody wants to go through that type of vetting, but anyway, how does a case end up in federal court?
We handle violations of federal law, and in North Dakota, some common areas that we see violations of federal law will be, obviously we have 4 major reservations in North Dakota and a little bit of a 5th. So violations of law in Indian country are federal crimes. Immigration offenses are federal crimes. Certain drug trafficking crimes rise to the level of federal crimes. We do a lot of, we can represent the IRS if people don't pay their taxes. Anytime you have a federal law enforcement agency that's investigating a case, those cases often get referred to us.
Yeah, because when you watch television, when you think of crossing state lines, makes it a federal jurisdiction.
Kidnapping, drug sales across state lines, that can give us a jurisdictional hook to bring those cases in federal court.
Okay. You mentioned Native American or reservations, I guess. I know you're actively involved in tribal issues and Native American crime issues. Can you talk about that involvement?
Absolutely. John, the reason I wanted to be U.S. Attorney was the experiences I'd had in Indian country as a lawyer in private practice, both as a law clerk and then representing Indian people in federal court in private practice. And some of the conditions I saw on the reservation back then really called out to me. I'll never forget the first time I visited Cannonball, North Dakota on the Standing Rock Reservation. I'll never forget driving into Cannonball and looking around, and that was a community just very different from what I had grown up in. And I said to myself, you know, how is it possible that in the 20th century at that time, that we have U.S. citizens and citizens of the state of North Dakota who live in isolation and poverty like that? And it really is what set me on the path to want to become U.S. Attorney, because we are the chief federal prosecutor. We're the chief prosecutor for crimes on the reservation. So public safety in Indian country is our business. We've adopted an anti-violence strategy for tribal communities. It's based on 3 prongs: enforcement of federal law, crime prevention, and reentry. We've seen our criminal filings in Indian country go up 70% in the last 2 years. Now, I don't think that means crime is up in Indian country, but we're doing more cases. We're not going to arrest our way out of the public safety problems on the reservation. So my office has also instituted a community prosecution strategy where the assistant U.S. attorneys who handle a single reservation actually travel there on a monthly or bi-monthly basis to become part of that community, to work with the tribal courts and the BIA law enforcement and the tribal councils to better understand those communities and to support viable crime prevention strategies. We have an assistant U.S. attorney who's spoken to high school students down at Standing Rock monthly last year and serves as a role model. He's actually an enrolled member himself at Turtle Mountain. Serves as a role model for some of those young Native kids and is presenting programs on staying away from drugs, staying away from drinking, talking about domestic violence, sexual abuse. And so we want to couple enforcement with crime prevention, and that's a new initiative that we've put in place over the last couple of years.
And of course right now Fort Totten Reservation near Devil's Lake, lots of issues going on with a recent infant death. And federal authorities I believe are maybe investigating and being called in. Can you talk about this?
Well, you know, we can't talk about ongoing investigations. We do have 2 open investigations in Fort Totten. A double homicide took place a little over a year ago. That case is pending. And then I have confirmed previously that there is an investigation by the FBI and the BIA into the death of the young 2-month-old earlier this summer. I can't really get into the facts of those. I can tell you that I personally and the lawyers in my office take very seriously our responsibility to ensure the safety of young children on the reservations, and those cases are priority cases for us.
Yeah, and what about Senator Conrad's office, I believe, calling for federal authorities to intervene? Are you working with the senator's office at all?
Well, we don't. We work very independently from senators of both parties and from the legislative branch. You know, we're executive branch entity, and we work very separately from the legislative branch. I did note that Senator Conrad had asked for BIA to come in. The social service program at the Spirit Lake Reservation is run by the tribe, but it is delegated from the BIA under a 638 contract. So the BIA does have some authority there as well, and I know that there were some top-ranking folks from BIA on the reservation here this week, and you know, I was up there last week. I met with the tribe. Again, you know, we're prosecutors. We deal with these cases, unfortunately, on the back end when they come to us as abuse and neglect cases. But of course, we're there to offer whatever assistance we can to the tribe, whatever technical assistance we can. We've got some training planned at Spirit Lake. We were up there last year and provided some training. Actually brought a pediatrician from Fargo who specializes in sexual abuse and child abuse to give a one-day training on signs to look for social service workers of abused children. So we're trying to assist the tribe in any way we can. At the same time, you know, unfortunately, sometimes we're the backstop for those cases that end up being investigated by the FBI where there has been abuse, and we have to bring those cases.
So yeah, with all that, what can be done on the reservations with all these matters? I mean, how does reservation life, the improvements there, compared to, you know, improvements in other areas and other cities in the U.S.?
Well, John, I believe that, you know, we talked about my trip to Cannonball and the isolation and poverty and sometimes hopelessness that you can see in the reservation. And my belief is that you're not going to see Native people overcome decades and decades of isolation and poverty until first and foremost they feel safe in their homes and communities, in their neighborhood. I'm involved in providing public safety to those reservations. I'm lucky. I get to get involved in that issue, that seminal issue that hopefully will help the reservations make that step. We've made some progress. Like I said, we've got some increased prosecution numbers. We're removing more dangerous folks from the reservation. We're also trying to work with the reservations on prevention programs. But this is not a short-term process. It's taken us many, many years to get in this situation, and we need true partnerships with the tribe and particularly tribal courts. I'm a big believer in strengthening tribal courts. If a tribal court system delivers consistent, effective punishment to misdemeanor crimes, public safety will go up on a reservation. The Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota right now has a pretty, they've done a good job with their court system over the last 5 years. We have a real partnership with the tribal prosecutor there. We're able to make decisions on how to work together on cases that we're only able to make because of the strength of their tribal court system. So I think the more that can be done to help tribal court systems is a real first step towards moving forward in improving public safety in reservation communities.
Tim, this is probably an ignorant question in some ways, but what's the relationship with a sovereign nation and U.S. Attorney working together?
The tribes are sovereign, and we obviously, when we interact with them, it's on a government-to-government relationship. Yes, okay. And we do that. Let's talk about that tribal prosecutor down at Standing Rock. We recently had a case where we had a large drug bust, 15, 16 folks arrested for dealing drugs, allegedly dealing drugs on the reservation. Now, some of those folks had lengthy criminal records. We charged them in federal court. Some of the others, though, were young men that maybe had taken just that first step down the wrong path. Because of that strong partnership, government to government, working together with the tribal prosecutor, we were able to have 3 or 4 of those young men charged in tribal court with misdemeanors. If they did not have a good tribal court system, those young men either would have been charged with federal felonies or not charged at all. But having that strong court system allows us really to interact prosecutor to prosecutor, shoulder to shoulder, to protect the community.
Okay. You talked about drugs. Let's switch to sort of drug trafficking as it pertains to the U.S.-Canadian border. I understand you're really involved with that. Can you talk some about that?
Well, you know, as the U.S. Attorney in North Dakota, Indian country and the border, those are sort of your bread and butter issues. And I've been very involved working with Border Patrol, the people that run the ports of entry, the Office of Field Operations, and across the border with our Canadian partners in the RCMP, the Mounties, and Canadian prosecutors as well. And we have to make sure we have a secure border. We work with those entities to ensure that. One of the issues we see is some drug trafficking. It's not like the U.S.-Mexican border where we see quite a bit of you know, more of a risk of drug smuggling, but we see some. And with the increase in population in the Bakken, in the western part of the state, which also spills into southern Saskatchewan, there's a vulnerability there that we want to make sure we're prepared to address. Drug trafficking in Grand Forks and Fargo are another top priority of our office. We have a great team of law enforcement officers and prosecutors in my office who do a really wonderful job with our OCDEF, Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. We've seen, you know, about 9 months ago, we saw a spike in heroin trafficking here in Fargo. In the last couple of months, we've seen a spike in synthetic drugs in Grand Forks, allegations that it cost 2 young men their lives up there. Our OCDEF task force and our Assistant U.S. Attorney here, Chris Myers, get into those issues very quickly, and we get a hold of those issues, and we bring cases, and we put folks that are going to peddle that horrible stuff in our communities. You know, we work hard to make sure that justice is done in those cases.
Okay. Let's switch to immigration law enforcement. I understand you're very involved with that and serve on a committee. Tell us about that.
Well, again, that's tied into our northern border. Because of our Border Patrol presence here, we see referrals of folks that are in the country illegally. It's a crime to be in the United States illegally if you've previously been deported, and it's a crime to be in the United States if you have false documents. We take referrals of those cases from Border Patrol. We bring a lot of those cases in federal court. We want to send a message that you know, we're going to vigorously protect or vigorously prosecute violations of federal law.
Yeah, you say Border Patrol, so I mean, you work closely with them?
We have a great relationship with Border Patrol. Border Patrol is one of the, most people I don't think would understand this. You say, what's the largest law enforcement entity in North Dakota? It's Border Patrol and OFO, the people, federal law enforcement that are securing our borders. So they have a lot of resources. They run a very professional shop, and we work very closely with Border Patrol. I have a great relationship with them.
Okay. I also understand you serve on a subcommittee involving environmental issues. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, you know, obviously with the increased oil extraction activity in the western part of the state, we're going to see environmental impacts, and this is an issue that's just very personal to me. I'm a hunter. I grew up hunting ducks in Minnesota and have really gotten into pheasant and grouse hunting here in western North Dakota. And you know, I'm a sportsman first, and want to make sure that we protect our sporting heritage here in North Dakota. You know, this isn't an anti-growth message. I mean, we want to make sure that we have industry, that we're working with them to ensure that the rules are being followed and that the stuff's coming out of the ground as safe as possible with as minimal environmental impact as possible. And so that's something that's near and dear to my heart because of my love of the outdoors and hunting, getting out with my Brittany Spaniel, Louie, and doing a little grouse hunting. We got opener coming up here in a couple weeks. I'm very excited.
Okay. I know your predecessor, Drew Wrigley, dealt with a major trial, of course, involving Drew Shadeen and of course, her killer, Rodriguez, who ultimately was, convicted and sentenced to death. I know his attorneys have made numerous appeals. Can you talk anything about that?
In fact, I can't. Shortly after I became U.S. Attorney, the Justice Department recused me from that case because of because of my association with my former law firm. I get recused from cases now and again because I came from private practice and have a firm that is sometimes opposite the U.S. Attorney's Office. And that's one of the cases that I was recused from. So I have not been involved in the loop in that case. In that case, Lynn Jordheim, my second in command, the first assistant U.S. Attorney, he serves as U.S. Attorney for all intents and purposes for the Shadeen case. And again, I have been out of the loop in that case because of that recusal.
Okay. You've talked some about your staff. I believe you mentioned 18. Can you talk about what your staffing is and where your offices are located?
We have manned offices in Bismarck and Fargo. We have 7 lawyers in Bismarck and 11 now in Fargo. We just hired two new lawyers this summer, both in Fargo. And we have support staff, so the total office is about 43, 44 people, split between the two cities. We have offices also unmanned in Grand Forks and Minot, where the federal court sits. But those are the offices. We've got, I worked at a real good law firm when I was, a couple of really good law firms when I was in private practice. And I thought I knew what it was to be around good lawyers. But, the lawyers and support staff at the U.S. Attorney's Office is simply the best law firm in North Dakota, hands down.
How did your prior experience help you now in this job?
Well, I have been involved in the federal criminal justice system for about 16 years before I became U.S. Attorney as a law clerk and then as a private practice lawyer doing some defense work, criminal defense work. And I think it's helped. I certainly understand criminal law, and the shift to being a prosecutor hasn't been that big of a one for me. I mean, I think that that's not that great of a challenge changing those hats. It's great, I think, sometimes when we sit down and talk about cases with the assistants, I think sometimes I bring a little bit different perspective. I might be able to say, well, that lawyer's going to argue this. And sometimes I get some looks and say, that's probably right, boss. That's right, I've enjoyed the transition. I've enjoyed being a prosecutor. I've gotten involved in some cases, done some appeals to help the office out. And, especially in the Indian country, the drug stuff, you really feel as a prosecutor that you're doing justice. And it's been very, very rewarding.
Tim, what's the toughest part of your job?
Well, the toughest part is the toughest part of the job. Again, I'm going to go back to this. I want to be the leader that the lawyers and staff in my office deserve, and they deserve a great leader because they are fantastic and they do great work. I want to make sure that every one of the lawyers who works for me reaches their potential and becomes that superstar that they should be. And so I want to make sure they have the resources to do that job. I want to make sure that I'm supporting them. That's a tough part of the job. The challenges in Indian country are tough. That's not a challenge you take on thinking you're going to solve in 6 months or 8 months. That's a 20-year project. But until we take the first step, we're not going to get anywhere. And I'm committed to taking that first step with our tribal partners. So those are tough parts of my job.
So what's the thing you like most about your job?
The ability to impact these areas, these important areas, it is very rewarding. Again, I come back to Indian country and it's a theme with me. That's why I wanted the job. But I can make a difference. I feel like I have the opportunity. This is my shot. This may be my shot for public service. I want to take advantage of it. And that's very, very rewarding to be able to implement some of the improvements that you've seen from the outside now that you're inside the U.S. Attorney's Office to try and do things to improve public safety on the reservation and in North Dakota as a whole.
And I assume you're hoping to stay in the position after November 6th.
Well, that's out of my control. I was appointed to a 4-year term, but I serve at the pleasure of the President of the United States, and how long I keep this job is something I have no control over.
Finally, Tim, if people want more information about you or the North Dakota U.S. Attorney, where's the best place to go?
We have a website we've worked hard on. You can go to our website. If you Google U.S. Attorney, North Dakota U.S. Attorney, you're going to find it. We've got a great section with a ton of resources, a ton of information on what we've done in Indian country, national security, stuff like that. So I certainly refer you to the website, and then our contact phone numbers are there as well.
Tim, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks
today.
for having me. This was great.
Stay tuned for more. Roseau, Minnesota is the birthplace of Polaris and the sport of snowmobiling. Today, research, development, and manufacturing of snowmobiles are located in the Roseau facility. As we tour the plant, we see that for employees, making great products is not just a job, it's a way of life.
The company was started in 1945. Edgar T. and David Johnson had this idea to build hoists and derricks, a device used to set telephone poles. In 1948, Alan Hatteen, Edgar's brother, joined them, and they did a lot of blacksmith work, doing whatever they could to keep cash flow and keep the bankers away from the door. The company remained Hatteen Hoist and Derrick until 1954, when it was incorporated as Polaris Industries. Polaris started in snowmobiles in 1956. From there on, things began to accelerate with snowmobiles, and the march was on for Polaris to bring snowmobiles into the future.
In the early days, most of the employees were farmers, so they farmed in the spring, putting their crops in, then they would work at Polaris until harvest time. And as Polaris grew, the women started transitioning into the assembly types of jobs. We'll even have 3 generations of a family working here at one given time. The Wide-Track LX is meant to be for utility type purposes. The primary use of that vehicle is for work. They'll pull sleighs of firewood or other equipment. The wide track on it gives it very good flotation and excellent towing capacity. That's what we will see being built today.
This is our tube fabrication area. We're bending and cutting the tubes to the sizes we need for our various components, putting in mounting features, locating features that help to locate the parts in the weld fixtures. So we're taking just long straight lengths of tubing and turning them into the individual components that we need to build our products.
We also do laser cutting. That's where we will cut features into the tubes and cutting them to lengths and various shapes.
This laser is very quickly cutting these oval holes, the round holes, the shape of this tube on the end.
As we move them into the next step of the process, they fit together in the fixtures and mate with the parts that they go along with. For the snowmobiles, we do very little welding. At this point, really all we weld is the bulkhead and then the cooling extrusions.
We have a combination of robotic and manual welding going on. The finished parts coming out of the robot that feeds into the next level assembly. An operator then takes that part and completes some welds that the robot's not able to get to.
The paint system is an e-coat and powder top coat type of system. It's very environmentally friendly.
This is the powder coating process, and so the material is just very much a chalky substance, powder, as the name implies, electrostatically bonded to the part, and then it goes through the oven where it heats the paint material and flows it and cures it onto the component that it's been painted onto.
We start out with the chassis, where we join the engine compartment with the tunnel being the area that houses the suspension under it and the seat and the passenger on the top side of it. As it progressed down the line, we put in the cooling system, the rear suspension and track assembly, and then the engine, and we move on into the seat and the hood, and you have a completed vehicle. We went through the run-up area, where they run the vehicle and run it through a series of diagnostics, making sure that all the lighting, the instrumentation works, that the vehicle goes in forward and reverse, low gear and high gear in the forward direction. Then into the crate. They put it into a shrink bag, which once the vehicle is fastened into the crate, the top half of the bag is put in place and zippered shut, and then we literally shrink the bag around the vehicle to protect it from the elements while it's in storage and in shipment to the dealers. We're a pretty tight-knit group, and everybody works very hard to help Polaris be successful. When I go through the plant, it's hard for me not to say hi to them and them to say hi to me. That's how we are on a normal basis. There are times when things get pretty hectic in the work area and here at Polaris, and everybody just really takes a lot of pride in helping to make Polaris successful. They work very hard to do that. They're family away from home.
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse for this week, and as always, thanks for watching.
Funding for Minnesota Legacy programs are provided by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, and by the members of Prairie Public.